You probably began your journey of faith believing a very specific promise. Constant peace, clear answers, firm direction, the sense that God would always feel close, almost tangible. That's what you were shown. That's what you heard in sermons, in videos, in testimonies. Faith looked beautiful, organized, safe. Something that would make sense while you were living it. But almost no one told you what happens next. No one prepared you for the moment when you keep believing, even when you don't feel anything. You pray the same way. You keep showing up. You keep trying to do the right thing. The words leave your mouth, but they don't seem to get past the ceiling. There's no chill down your spine. No comfort. No strong sense of presence like everyone talks about. And quietly, a question starts forming, one you don't dare say out loud. What's wrong with me? The guilt comes fast. Because if faith is supposed to mean feeling God, then not feeling must mean failure. Lack of surrender. Hidden sin. Spiritual coldness. You start examining yourself from the inside, trying to find where you messed up. You replay your actions, your thoughts, your prayers. Nothing seems bad enough, and that only makes the confusion worse. Comparison slips in without permission. You look at other people and they seem so sure, so full, so spiritual. They speak with conviction, cry during worship, lift their hands, say they hear God clearly. And there you are, walking the same path, following the same steps, but feeling empty inside. Not empty of meaning, empty of sensation, empty of response. The most painful part isn't doubt. It's the contrast. It's feeling like you're falling behind while everyone else is moving forward. It's the sense that you're doing everything right and still feeling distant. Like faith has become a mechanical effort instead of a living relationship. You keep going because you believe, or maybe because you're afraid to stop. Afraid to admit something changed. Afraid to discover that the beautiful version of faith you were given doesn't explain what you're living now. So you continue. Quietly. Without complaining. Without telling anyone. Because complaining feels ungrateful, and questioning feels weak. But the truth is, this pain doesn't come from the absence of faith. It comes from the collision between expectation and reality. From the moment faith stops being emotionally rewarding and starts being existentially heavy. From the point where believing no longer brings immediate relief, only continuation. And maybe the problem isn't that your faith is dying. Maybe the problem is that no one told you what happens when faith stops being something you feel, and has to be sustained for the first time without emotional support at all. There's a side of faith that almost no one shows. Not because it isn't real, but because it isn't pretty, doesn't make for exciting testimonies, and definitely doesn't turn into viral videos. It's the side where nothing spectacular happens. The side where you keep praying and the sky doesn't open. You keep reading and feel no spark. You keep serving, showing up, trying, but without that emotional charge that once convinced you God was close. This side doesn't get a stage, applause, or catchy quotes. So it's rarely discussed. And yet, this is exactly where faith matures. Immature faith is born in environments of intensity. Powerful moments, moving music, words that feel like direct answers from heaven. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem is assuming that's the foundation of faith. Emotion can sustain a beginning, but not a long journey. Mature faith is built when the extraordinary fades and the ordinary remains. Normal days. Simple prayers. Readings that feel dry. Services that don't feel special. Repeated routines. Long silences. And still, you don't walk away. Not because you're feeling a lot, but because you've decided to remain even when you feel very little. That isn't spiritual weakness. It's depth being formed. We were taught to measure spirituality by what we feel. But Scripture shows something different. People who kept walking with God through long deserts, confusing waits, and seasons when heaven seemed closed. It wasn't lack of faith. It was faith no longer dependent on stimulation. What almost no one says is that God doesn't build deep people on constant emotional highs. He builds them in faithful repetition. In obedience without an audience. In prayers that seem to come back empty. On the day you feel nothing. And still don't quit. Because when faith only exists while it's felt, it's still fragile. It depends on the environment, the music, the right moment. But when faith continues without emotional reinforcement, it stops being a reaction and becomes conviction. And conviction is quieter than emotion. Maybe you've been judging yourself as cold, distant, or spiritually worse than before. But what if you've simply left the phase where God drew you through feelings, and entered the phase where He forms you through staying? This side of faith isn't advertised because it doesn't impress anyone from the outside. But it's what sustains a lifetime for those who don't abandon the path when the feelings fade. And maybe what you've called a loss of faith is actually the beginning of a faith that no longer depends on feeling in order to keep existing. There comes a point in the spiritual journey that almost no one recognizes when it arrives, but many people give up right there. It's the moment when faith stops being supported by what you feel and starts being supported by the decision to trust. Until then, many things made sense because emotion was involved. You felt peace, motivation, direction. Prayer brought quick relief. God's presence felt noticeable. There was an emotional reward reinforcing your faith. Then a season comes when that fades. Not because God left. Not because you failed. But because the foundation is shifting. This is where many people panic and think, I've lost my faith. But in reality, this may be the transition from childish faith to mature faith. Childish faith depends on feelings to stay alive. It needs constant confirmation, experiences that prove everything is okay. Mature faith begins to stand on something deeper than emotion, choice, conviction. Staying, even when the inside doesn't cooperate. The Bible doesn't hide this point of tension. David, called a man after God's own heart, wrote psalms that are far from triumphant. How long, Lord? Will you forget me forever? Psalm 13. That's not the voice of someone in spiritual ecstasy. It's the prayer of someone in anguish who feels forgotten and still keeps talking to God. His faith shows up not as a feeling of closeness, but as the decision not to break the conversation in the middle of pain. Job walks this territory too. He loses everything, receives no immediate explanation, and spends chapter after chapter questioning, grieving, and trying to understand what's happening. God's silence is central to the story. Yet even without answers, Job keeps addressing Him. Faith there isn't emotional calm, it's relational persistence in the middle of confusion. And maybe the most striking example is Jesus in Gethsemane. On the night before the cross, He prays in deep anguish. There is no visible intervention, no immediate relief. There is silence, and the continuation of a painful path. Obedience doesn't rise from spiritual euphoria, but from conscious surrender, not as I will, but as you will. Trust remains, even when the weight is crushing. This is the frightening point, when feeling stops being the main engine. Because now faith looks less like enthusiasm and more like quiet steadiness. God's silence takes on a different meaning. It isn't automatically absence. It isn't proof of rejection. Often, it's the environment where faith deepens, where it stops depending on stimulation and starts growing roots. Roots grow in the dark. And maybe this season you called loss is actually the exact moment your faith is moving beyond fragility and emotional dependence, and becoming strong enough to endure any season, even when the sky seems silent. When faith enters this quieter, less emotional, almost invisible phase, the question that usually comes is, what do I do now? Because when the feeling fades, many people think the only option is to try to get it back. They chase stronger experiences, try to stir emotion again, attempt to recreate moments from the past. But mature faith isn't built by running after old sensations. It's strengthened by learning to remain even when they don't return with the same intensity. The first step is simple, but deep. Keep praying, even when nothing feels special. In this phase, prayer stops being about immediate relief and becomes about ongoing relationship. Sometimes prayer will feel ordinary, repetitive, even dry. Still, it keeps the connection alive. You continue speaking to God not because you're emotionally inspired, but because you choose not to break the bond. The second step is to remain, even without emotion. This means continuing in the same direction through the small decisions of daily life. Continuing to seek coherence between what you believe and how you live, even when enthusiasm isn't there. Faith here looks much more like quiet faithfulness than spiritual intensity. It's waking up and moving forward, doing what is right, keeping simple practices, not because you feel a lot, but because you've decided not to abandon the path. The third step is learning to trust God's character rather than your own sensations. Feelings change all the time. What you feel today may be completely different tomorrow. If your spiritual security depends on that, everything becomes unstable. But when the foundation shifts to who God is, not what you feel about Him on a given day, faith gains a different kind of firmness. You begin to lean on convictions built over time, not emotions that rise and fall. This is where faith becomes deeper, even if it looks simpler on the outside. The faith no one shows is the faith that continues when there is nothing to feel. It doesn't draw attention, doesn't produce stories full of euphoria, doesn't look impressive. But this is the faith that survives years, crises, losses, and silences without disappearing. It's what sustains the journey when intense seasons pass. If this message is putting words to something you've lived for a long time but never knew how to explain, subscribe to the channel. The goal here isn't to talk only about the beautiful, exciting side of faith, but about real faith, the kind that matures in silence, grows roots in the unseen, and stays firm even when emotion is no longer leading the way. At some point in the journey, you stop asking only, "Why don't I feel God?" and begin, even without realizing it, to face a deeper question. What if faith isn't about feeling all the time? That moment is usually quiet. It doesn't come with announcements, background music, or a dramatic experience to talk about later. It arrives in the middle of routine, in ordinary days, in prayers that seem to hit the ceiling. And precisely because it feels so ordinary, many people think only loss is happening there. Loss of intensity, loss of excitement, loss of the sense of closeness. But not every loss is regression. Some are transitions. You lose a faith built on constant emotion, and begin to discover a faith that survives even when emotion fails. You lose the need for constant signs, and begin to develop a trust that doesn't depend on immediate confirmation. You lose the illusion of spiritual control, and start learning to walk without having all the answers in your hands. That hurts. Because it's like leaving a brightly lit place and entering one where visibility is limited. Where you can't see the whole path, only the next step. Where you don't feel the same emotional security as before, and yet, you keep walking. And it's in that place that faith stops being only an experience and starts becoming a deeper, steadier, more real relationship. You keep praying, even without the chills. You keep trusting, even with questions. You keep walking, even without that emotional certainty you once had. From the outside, it may look like nothing special is happening. But on the inside, something essential is being formed, a faith that doesn't depend on favorable emotional weather to exist. Maybe you called this distance. Maybe you called it coldness. Maybe you thought you were failing. But there's another way to see it. Maybe you're not far from God. Maybe you're learning to walk with Him in the dark. And walking in the dark doesn't mean walking alone. It means learning to trust in presence even when it isn't clearly felt. It means discovering that faith isn't holding God's hand only when you feel His touch. It's continuing to reach out your hand even when everything feels silent. The side of faith that no one shows isn't the most beautiful or the most exciting. It's the quietest, the most ordinary, the least marketable. But it's exactly this side that sustains the journey when feelings fade, when answers take time, and when real life remains challenging. The side of faith that no one shows is precisely what makes it real.